Welcome to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast, where we talk about homesteading stuff and life stuff and everything in between. Join me, Amy Dingman, as we explore big questions on a little farm. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Farmish Kind of Life podcast. I am Amy Dingman. I'm your host, coming to you from central Minnesota on Clucky Dickens Farm, where I think it's going to be spring again. We had a little cold snap. Let me tell you, it is hard to go from almost 80 degrees down to a high in the 30s. That's real tough. But that's why we're so resilient here, right? And I shouldn't say just in Minnesota, because I know this happens everywhere, but 'tis the time of year when you can start the morning in a winter coat and then, be in a tank top and be barefoot by afternoon. That is the season we are in. Thank you for joining me here today. What are we going to talk about today? On episode 275 on April 22nd, 2024. Today we're going to talk about how I think convenience is killing us, or at least making us unhealthy. This is going to be a little bit of a disjointed kind of episode. I'm just going to pour out some thoughts that I've been thinking. I didn't really have time this weekend to organize them very well, but I didn't want to not do a podcast. And so you're just going to get my kind of blasting of thoughts here. So I apologize for the randomness of it, but it was a busy weekend. Let me tell you about some things that happened. I did have a birthday. I celebrated my 45th birthday. What did I do for my birthday? I worked in my little barn and I did some yard work, and it was a delightful day. I'm becoming an old, dull person, I think. What else? I'm watching my seeds pop up. I've started a bunch of seeds. There's just a lot of, spring kind of things here. The baby chicks are growing, all that good stuff. We did have something very sad happen on the farm. Poofy Kitty, who's kind of been our mascot here at Clucky Dickens Farm, especially on Facebook. Everybody just loves the Poofy Kitty stories that I share on Facebook. Poofy Kitty passed away, and I'm not sure what happened. I went up into the hayloft to check some things out, the hayloft of the big barn, and I saw her up there. She was curled up, looked like she was sleeping. Upon investigation, I discovered she was not sleeping. She had passed away. So I don't know what happened. But yeah, that was not awesome. I'm very sad about that. She was a good helper. She was always there to supervise. And now I don't have that supervisor. But our kitten from last year, I believe she was from last year. Her name is Ava. She is the most obnoxious cat. She tries to balance on the tiniest things, and she's always getting herself into trouble because she thinks she can get into or onto or around things that she can't, and then she has to be rescued. But she's very entertaining, and she's been spending a lot of time with me, so I think she's kind of like, hey, I think I'm going to try and step in here as, well, not the supervisor, but at least the entertainment. So that is some sad news for us. That was something else we were dealing with this last week. There's just been a lot lately. You ever go through those times in life where you just feel like, man, there is just a lot that has been happening and changing. So yeah, that's where we're at right now. The other thing, I did mention that I was working really hard in our little barn. That's what I was doing on my birthday. I was doing a lot of work in there and doing some modifications and some sprucing up to the little barn for some future stuff that we're going to be doing. Spending a lot of time with that, and stay tuned to find out what's happening with all of that. All right, this is all disjointed and crazy, but let's head over to the main topic and talk about me and all my thoughts and opinions about why I think convenience is kind of killing us. Recently, I was helping to promote a Back to the 50s event that's going to be happening next month in our community. And so as just promoting this event, some of us had dressed up in 1950s-ish kind of gear, and we were serving brownie sundaes, and it was very fun. And as we were setting up for this kind of promo event for the big event, we were talking about why people in the 1950s were skinnier. There's a bunch of us ladies, and we were all standing around talking about, man, back in the 50s, they were just so much thinner, and why do you think that was? And so it just became this big conversation that we were having, and it continued throughout the day for me with other people. It kind of became this rabbit hole that I was going down, right? And then I took it to social media, and I started asking on social media, why do you think people in the 1950s were skinnier? There were some people that wanted to point out everyone smoked. That's why people were skinnier. and not as many people smoke now. So that's why we're overweight. There were a lot of people who wanted to say that all of the housewives were on amphetamines, right? It was in the diet pills that they were prescribed. So all the housewives were on amphetamines, and that's why they were all so skinny, right? So there was some of that, but there were also a lot of people who talked about how we don't do nearly as much physical activity anymore. And with that, we also eat a lot more. Our portion sizes are huge compared to back then. And so I went down this rabbit hole about physical activity and food and all this stuff kind of regarding the 1950s and what was kind of happening then and why it's different now and all that, right? Here's something we need to be really honest about. And now when I say we and I say you in this podcast episode, realize for the most part, I am referring to the general you and the general we. So there are some things here which are not going to apply specifically to your situation, but I'm talking about the general population, the general we, okay? So with that in mind, here's the thing. We sit at the computer, right? We sit on our way to work. We sit at work. We sit and we let someone else load our groceries, or we have a subscription box bring it to our doorstep. We sit after we make supper while we watch TV or we doom scroll on our phone. We sit to mow our lawn. We have robots now that can vacuum our houses. We feel really, really awesome about ourselves if we get a 15-minute walk in, or we spend some time on the Peloton bike. We feel really awesome. Or we make it to the gym. We feel really awesome about ourselves because we're sitting the rest of the day. If you've been here for a while, you know that I got a desk job in June of 2022, so almost 2 years ago. We're quickly approaching the 2-year mark of having had that job outside the home. And that was the first job that I'd had outside the home since I'd had kids. And I am done with that job in a couple weeks here. The middle of May, I will be done with that job and coming back home full time to do a whole bunch of other stuff. But that's for future discussions. But so I got that desk job in June of 2022. And I'm going to be super honest with you here, okay? In 2 years, I have gained almost 18 pounds. 18 pounds after 2 years of having a desk job. Okay, now I know hormones because I also just turned 45, right? So hormones are a thing. And like there's a million other things you're going to toss at me as the answer of here's why you gained weight in the last 2 years. But the biggest change, you guys, the overarching change that happened is that I sat at a desk with a computer for hours and didn't move. I didn't move. There was no reason to move. There was no reason to get up and do something else. It was a sitting job, okay? And then when I got home from work, especially when those hours were full-time there for about 6 months, when I got home, I was tired, right? And it was really easy to then just sit on the couch and watch TV or doom scroll. Or even try to be productive and work on a book or edit a podcast or whatever, which guess what? That is still sitting. It's still sitting. It's all sitting. It's not physical work. Obesity rates have tripled in 3 decades. That was a statistic that I found quite commonly. And I don't think this has to do with smoking. I don't think this has to do with amphetamines. I think it has to do with the fact that most of us are doing a lot less than our parents or our grandparents or our great-grandparents, or go back as far as you want to go. We are doing a lot less than they were. In the medieval times, they knew you were rich if you were plump, right? You had money for food, food was accessible to you, and you had servants to do your manual labor. So people tend to get a little fluffy, right? Now, I am not saying at all that food is affordable right now, but if you have food in your life, you're pretty blessed. If you can get food, even if you're going to complain about how ungodly expensive it is right now, if you can get that food, you're pretty blessed. And if you substitute technology as your servant, which so many of us do in so many different ways, and we don't even think of it as that, but if you think of technology as some kind of servant that's doing all the work for you, it's almost like we didn't learn the first time, y'all. Now, again, side note, yes, hormones. Yes, stuff in our food. Yes, all of that is different, and all of that affects us. And I don't even know that that goes against what this podcast episode is talking about, because I think we could all argue that all that stuff is also an issue because of convenience. Like our food, the way our food is made now is because of convenience, and that has changed food for us. And, there's stuff in the food and all of that. That's a whole nother podcast episode. But you could also argue that all of that is convenience. So yes, this is still about convenience screwing with us. But so many people I talk to want to blame that stuff. Okay? It's the hormones. It's the stuff in our food. It's genetics. All that stuff that's harder for us to personally touch. We just say, oh, well, genetics. Or, oh, well, the stuff's in the food. What are we supposed to do? Of course we're going to get bigger because, that's what it's happening with the food. It's all the stuff that's in the food. We want to blame all the stuff that's harder for us to have control over. And we don't want to talk about the stuff that we really can touch, which is how often we get our ass out of the chair, or how many times we elect to do things the harder way or the longer way or the old-fashioned way, which we have a little bit of control over. A little bit. And I know, here's a frustrating thing. Some of that is impossible. Let's say you get a desk job. It's not like you can go to your boss and say, so here's the thing. I don't really want to sit to do this job. I don't want to sit at my desk in the office. Would it be possible for me to do my work while I walk around the building 100 times? Your boss would be like, what? Some of life has just morphed into, this is how it works. This is how the culture is. This is how the setup is now. This is how it works if we want to have the businesses we have, the conveniences we have, the opportunities we have. This is how it works now. This is the setup. We don't move all day, and then we buy gym memberships so we have an excuse to move. Does anybody see how backwards this is? Let me say it again. We don't move all day, and then we buy gym memberships so we have an excuse to move. That is backwards. Do you know what my great uncle would say if he were still here? He was such a spitfire, and he'd tell you exactly what he thought. And he had lived through the Great Depression. And we would just have these amazing conversations, right? Do you know what my great uncle would say if he were still here? And I told him that we needed a gym membership so we could remember to move our bodies, and that most of the time we were going to think up every excuse in the book why we weren't going to get to the gym today. That's the only way we can actually move our body, is to have a gym membership, or to think, man, I should really go on a walk because I need to move. He would look at me and he would curse a streak so blue that you'd probably see it in Antarctica. He'd be like, what is wrong with you? He was a farmer. He'd say, what is wrong with you guys? The food we cook now is more convenient. If a recipe has too many steps in it, we throw it out. If it takes too long to make, we throw it out. We don't have time. And I get it, because when I was working full time, I totally get it, you guys. There isn't time. You're exhausted. You're like, I don't want to do anything. I just want to sit on the couch and do nothing. I'm tired. I don't have time to make this big meal. I don't have time to cook from scratch. I don't have time to take care of this. Right? And here's the problem. We are so busy and worn out. And this has been the way it's been through time, right? We're very busy, we're very worn out, so we invent ways to make the work easier and quicker to do. And then the time that we saved gets filled with more stuff that we invent ways to make quicker and easier to do. It's like this cycle. And then we invent more things that make our life easier and quicker and require less effort. But then we also create diets and gyms and supplements, because the improvements and the technology and the convenience is taking away some of the stuff we actually needed. And yes, side note again, there are people out there who are moving their butts a lot who still can't drop weight. Yes, there is that. I'm not saying there isn't that. And also, I would relate this back to things that have been done to our food or done to the world in the name of convenience, okay? But in a room of 100 people who complain about their weight and complain about their aches and their pains, I would be willing to bet that 95 of them are not as active as they say they are. When my husband and I were driving home from town a few days ago, I was looking in the fields, which are not planted here yet, and I saw some like small vehicle tracks in a nearby field, and I was like, who's out messing around in the fields? It looked like someone had taken a four-wheeler or something, and I immediately am thinking kids screwing around in the field. And my husband says, they were probably out picking rock, Amy, because, they don't walk to pick up rock from the field anymore. They use skid loaders and four-wheelers and different things. Which got me thinking again about all these time savers and improvements and how they change our health. And we came back to that conversation again. It's like, oh yeah, people used to walk and pick up rock. Now we use skid loaders so we can sit. And that's awesome. That's so much easier and it requires less effort. But what's happening to our bodies? Now we have to think about working out because we've taken all the physical activity away from the rest of our day. I told my husband, I want a push mower. Okay, we have a rider. We've actually taken to mowing with the tractor, like the big tractor, sometimes because it gets out of control. And I told him, you know what, I think we need a push mower. And he reminds me, he says, you know what, we actually do have an old school reel mower, like human-powered reel mower. No gas, no power, nothing like that. It's like human power, right? And I said, I should start using that reel mower to mow. And he looks at me like, what is wrong with you, Amy? And I asked him, how did they mow the farm before riding lawnmowers and tractors were invented? I mean, even with like a push mower, like a gas push mower, it would be a lot because we would have a lot to mow here. And he said people didn't used to have such big yards back in the day because it wasn't as easy for them to take care of them. And they didn't have time to take care of these big yards because they were working doing other stuff on the farm or like other stuff in life because it took more time. So they didn't have these huge manicured lawns. Not like our lawn is manicured at all, but it is cut, right? So here's the crazy thing. For my birthday, I went out and I found that reel mower, okay? And I was thinking, it's probably so rusty, it's not even going to work. It works, it turns, and I'm like, oh, there's some patches in our lawn that are really long. And so I think I'm going to go out there and just like push this around and see how it feels and see how it works. And y'all, I'm telling you, if you use a reel mower on your lawn, it is not self-propelled. It is Amy Dingman propelled or whoever you are propelled. And what I was thinking was going to be the hard work of it was going to be, it's going to be a lot of steps. It's going to be, like I'm going to have to push and it's going to be like my thighs that are going to be burning, right? Because it's like work. Using a reel mower is a shoulder workout because you are pushing. You're pushing with your arms and your shoulders. This is a workout that I didn't even realize what kind of workout it was, but I liked it. I liked pushing the reel mower. I like the way it sounds. I like that I can immediately smell the fresh cut grass. Like I'm not 300 feet past it before like the aroma hits you. Like it's slow and it's connecting. And I like the way it sounds and I like the way it feels when you're cutting through the grass. And I told my husband this and he's like, Amy, I swear to God, you are just the craziest thing ever. But there's my little side note. Reel mowers, get yourself one. If that's your thing, if you're reel mowing once a week, that's going to do your body good. All right. So some of this like modern life thing, I don't know how to change it because in 2024, how do you change it? Because most of our modern life is set up to exist in an easy, less physical, more technological way. And if you want physical activity, you have to go out and purposely find it. That's the world we live in today. And that's so weird to say out loud. It's so weird to sit down and think about. And I realize that some of you work physical jobs and you're listening to this going, Amy, I get 12,000 steps a day. I get 15,000 steps a day. I'm doing flights of stairs. I'm carrying heavy equipment. Now, if that's you, that's awesome. Give yourself a pat on the back and know that this episode is not about you. And also know that you are in the minority when we're talking about the whole of our country. You are definitely in the minority. So when I was researching all this and I'm thinking 1950s and I'm thinking, okay, so how do we change this? We're like the modern world and we can't go back, to 1950. I'm thinking, how else can I think about this? And I start thinking about the Amish community. And I start thinking about how they don't have the conveniences of modern life, right? And everything that they're doing is so physical. So then I try to find some research about that. And there was this study done about 20 years ago in one certain Amish community. I think it was in Ontario, Canada. I think it was an old order Amish community. And in 2004, the American College of Sports Medicine fitted Amish volunteers with pedometers because they wanted to see how much physical activity they actually performed. And what they found was that the Amish men took generally 18,425 steps a day. Generally speaking, that was their normal. 18,425 steps a day. The women averaged 14,196 steps a day. Average. That is their average, what they're getting every single day. So men, 18,000, women, 14,000. Now let's compare that with their non-Amish counterparts who are generally encouraged by their doctors to shoot for 10,000 steps, and they generally don't get it. You might have a doctor who says, just if you can get 5,000 steps, then you're doing good. Just shoot for 5,000. We're being told to shoot for 5,000 steps, and our Amish counterparts are getting 14,000 to 18,000 steps on a day without even thinking about it because that is their lifestyle. That's their world. That's their normal. Now, one result of this is that only about 4% of the Amish people are obese, compared with almost 40% of the overall U.S. population being obese. I don't think this is about smoking, y'all. I don't think this is about amphetamines. Do you know how many steps you get a day? Because if you're not tracking it, you probably have no clue. And if you're not tracking it, you probably think it's way more than you're actually getting. I asked someone the other day to check their pedometer, and they checked, and they realized they had less than 2,000 steps in 24 hours. And the look on their face when they realized that. Listen, just because you feel tired, just because you've been busy with something does not mean your body was moving. Being exhausted because you got 2,000 steps, being exhausted because you got 7,500 steps, that's great. I'm glad you're getting steps, but Amish people getting 18,000, 14,000 steps. I don't know what people are getting in the 50s. Otherwise, I would be telling you, here's the stats from the 50s. I don't think people were wearing pedometers in the 50s. And if they were, I can't find that research. But do you get what I'm saying? We want things easier. We don't want to sweat unless we're doing it in a gym or some other specialized thing. Good Lord, why would we want to sweat in our regular life? We're beyond that. We're better than that, right? We don't want to sweat unless we want to sweat. We want our food to be easy. We want it available right now. These are all the conveniences I'm talking about, y'all. We want everything to be connected. We want Bluetooth everything, Wi-Fi everything. Alexa, do this for me. You want to know the answer to something? You no longer have to walk to the library and through the library anymore, using the card catalog and searching the shelves. You can practically just think about your question, and it seems like the damn thing shows up on your smartphone, right? We all started buying stuff online because it was more convenient, and now some of us haven't even walked through an actual store in years. I have friends who have not been inside a grocery store in years. They order their food sitting on their couch or from their desk at work, and then after work, they drive to the store and someone else loads it, and then they bring it home. And that's really awesome. That's super convenient. But now you literally have not moved. And this happens in so many things we're doing nowadays. And all these seemingly stupid, annoying things that we took away because we didn't want to have to deal with them anymore, like walking through a grocery store, those things actually did more for our bodies than we realized. And all these wonderful, amazing conveniences that we've added have actually made other things more difficult for us. It used to be a really big deal to see a drive-in movie. It used to be an event. We're going to go see a drive-in show and we're going to drink a soda, right? Now we can spend the entire weekend binge watching Netflix and drinking as much Coke as we want while we lounge on our couch. Do you see the difference? So what do we do about this? If you're someone who's listening to this and you're like, oh, right on, I never thought about this. Or you're like, yeah, right, okay. But how do we change it? We can't get in a time machine and go back 75 years or 100 years. We're probably not all going to decide to join an Amish community. In regular, mainstream modern life, and even a lot of not mainstream modern life, because I would say a lot of homesteaders would say they're not mainstream, and I would still say there's a lot of conveniences that we've got that are making it really easy for us to not do as much as we could. The conveniences and the improvements and the inventions and the technology have made some of the things that used to be normal completely obsolete now. Or they've made it like it would be ridiculous if you were going to try to do them now. You would look silly, right? You'd have to go out of your way to go, okay, how could I do this in a way that makes me more physically active? Like, we actually have to think about that now. Why is that? But here's kind of the big thing that I come back to. We did all these time-saving things, all these technological improvements, all these things that make things more convenient. We did all of that so we could have more time. To what? To what? We're not any less busy than we were before. It's not like we get done with 4 hours of work and have the rest of the day to do whatever we want. It's not like we've added 7 hours to each day. So did we actually save any time at all? And when we saved time and added more stuff in, what was the stuff we added in? And how do we feel about these things? What did you actually trade for being able to do things faster and easier? What did we actually save when we made things faster and easier? And was it worth it? And I don't have the answer, and it's probably different for everyone. But if you're going to tell me that the reason over 40% of our nation is obese is because now only 12% of us smoke cigarettes, or that it's all because of what they put in our food, or it's all because of hormones, I think you're missing a really, really big point. Some of these conveniences that we've added to our life, I think, are actually not very convenient at all. That's my episode for you this week. I hope you got something out of that, got your brain going on some of these things. Get yourself a real mower if you can. How fun is that? I feel like this episode was a little bit disjointed today, so hopefully you pulled something useful out of it. If you've got anything you want to say about this episode or discuss about this episode, drop me a line at amy@afarmishkindoflife.com. Otherwise, find me on social media and we can hash this out and figure out the answers to all the problems of the world, or something like that. All right, have a great week, you guys, and I will talk to you again soon. Hope you enjoyed the show today. To continue the conversation, visit our website at afarmishkindoflife.com, find A Farmish Kind of Life on social media, or drop me an email at amy@afarmishkindoflife.com. Peace, love, and bacon, y'all. Stay farmish.